All right, we're back. This has flown by. Shana, we're going to have to keep the conversation going somehow. Mara, come on now. It's like, I'm like, this isn't enough. But I want to close out this conversation by talking about you. Before we get to you, I just want to ask one last question about the Black community and Black tradition. Like there's certain, particularly African-American traditions. And this is like a deep topic that like we are glossing over majorly when I think about like slave diet and how that's like transmuted. It's like now in the present day. We're going to talk about that in another episode, I think. But I just want to talk about now. There are certain foods that are just community food. Like I was literally just trolling a friend about mac and cheese and being like, that is not, what kind of mac and cheese is that? Like that is not the kind of mac and cheese you should be eating. Don't tell me nothing about chickpeas and what are you talking about? Anyways, there are certain foods that we have in our community, right, that we've been told are bad foods. Or if we ate them every day or were staples of our diet, which maybe some of us grew up on them being staples of our diet, how do we then, and we say, I want to eat differently, how do we marry that? Like, how do we still continue to have our family traditions, have our cultural traditions, our community traditions, while intuitively eating?
Yeah. So I will say, food is social, and a big part, there are many reasons why we eat the way we do, what food represents. And one of those things is the social connections. Actually, 3 of those things, right? It's cultural, it's familial, right, with the family traditions, and it's social. When you look back on any culture, but especially, of course, African-American, when you think of soul food, right? Like when I think of the movie, I think of like that big communal dinner, right? But, every culture has that, right? Well, I won't say that, but I can speak for myself, but I will say that so many cultures are centered around food, around history, around gatherings. And it's so important because unfortunately, the way we view food with that sort of disordered lens kind of does affect that. And I will say this, if you, meaning any person listening to this, let's say you go to the doctor and you find out there's a certain condition or illness. I'm not taking that away. I'm not saying to ignore that, but I kind of hesitate when we call cultural foods bad or unhealthy, because we are kind of calling ourselves unhealthy demographic. We're calling, or any culture that's associated with it, right? Because when you look at a lot of illnesses or diseases, we're so used to saying, well, that demographic, of course, African Americans have high blood pressure, have high rates of diabetes, things like that. And we're saying it's the way we eat. And I know this is kind of ranting, but we have to also realize there are things like racism, there are things like systemic barriers, right? Unequal healthcare, things like that are actually more so affecting our health rather than just the food. So that's for like another episode at another time.
Yes, but important. Thank you for calling that out.
Yeah.
That's very important.
Yeah. So I just really hesitate when people just say as a whole, like Black people eat unhealthy or Caribbean foods are unhealthy. I wouldn't frame it like that. If you feel like you have to, and I'm with you on the mac and cheese, I will say that. But let's say you want to add your chickpeas, or I've seen some other, interesting variations as well. You can do that. But I like, as far as framing it, oh, this is the healthier version, or this is like the better for you version, I wouldn't necessarily frame it like that. Again, being mindful of how we speak about food. I always say if you need to alter something on an individual level, that's fine. That's fine. But as a whole, I would hesitate to call a cultural food unhealthy, because food is more than nutrients. Of course, we're getting our nutrients, we're getting our macronutrients, antioxidants, all that great stuff. But food doesn't just represent nutrients. It represents culture. It represents social connections. Because when you think about, you think about like Thanksgiving or some other really large holiday, I think about the tradition of cooking with your family in the kitchen, of, everyone has their, station, and it's just that family, it's that like love and support. And, you know, I just hesitate when people say, well, that's unhealthy. It feels like it's diminishing that joy. So it's just, you know, all that to say, I think we could be more mindful of how we talk about food, especially cultural foods. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for that. You heard it here first. Don't let people tell you that your cultural or communal food is not healthy.
Yeah.
And instead of even going there, just fall upon the principles of intuitive eating, right? Like, just, you know, like, I'm not giving up mac and cheese. I want it done the right way. I may decide, and I'm gonna say it, there's a right way. I'm not gonna say what that is, but we all know that. So I'm gonna have it the right way, and I'm just gonna stop when I'm full, or I'm gonna make sure I had a salad earlier in the day to like feel like I've got some vegetables, so I can just have my bowl and call it good. So I love that. I love that you said that. I think it's so important and so necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I think that, you know, it's so interesting because, again, like with the right way, I also think that too, you know, and it's when I see people making something like mac and cheese and everyone wants to get the fat-free this or the fat, you know, whatever. And again, I'm not knocking that if you personally want to make it that way for yourself, but you have to understand too, I always say when something is like fat-free, you have to think about, okay, what are they replacing it with? Like, as far as the taste, since, you know, it's not going to taste the same. And is that really going to satisfy you? Like, taste-wise, is that fat-free, you know, product going to satisfy you the same way? So things to think about. But again, that's like a whole nother...
That's a whole other there. Like, this is a series. We're going to have a series. And I agree with you. Like, you know, it's free of fat, but what are you picking up once you take the fat out? And a lot of times you'll find an excess sodium and excess sugar. Yeah. So it's like, you might as well just have the real thing, you know? You might as well just have, and there's the right way and the real thing. Anyways, it'll be using all that coded language. My last question for you, Shana, this has been great, and I think it's just the start of a conversation, but what brings you joy? That's what I want to know. I want to know what brings Shana joy.
Yes, I think that honestly, I mean, of course, food, like, you know, as a dietitian, I love trying different cuisines and everything. But I think that for the past few years, I have to say, really kind of honoring and really revisiting friendships and making my friendships stronger and definitely connections. And I think sometimes listen, there's good and bad with social media, but I think sometimes many of us are very used to that like online connection instead of that in-person connection. And I really do find, and I'm an introvert, but I still, you know, will honor meeting in person. But I think that I'm finding that really with certain people, I find it to be joyful. And I really look forward to having that connection, that community. And I will say that for the past few years, when I started really working on that and really honoring that, I have found more joy in my life. And I think that's just like so important for everyone, for sure.
Agreed. Mm-hmm. And I love that you said food. We need to say
of course, food too. Yeah. No, there's usually food with those connections.
Yes, of course. Yes, absolutely, as there should be. Shana, thank you so much. This is really just the beginning of a conversation. How can we continue to connect with you?
Yeah, so my social media on all platforms is the Nutrition Tea. And that's across the board. I'm very easy to find, actually, because that's my name for everything. And also, I have a book out right now called Live Nourished that is available wherever books are sold, also audiobook. So, and it talks in depth about the things that we just talked about. So if anyone's interested in that, that's where to find me.
And we'll have the links for all of that in the show notes so people can connect and grab that book because it sounds like it's going to be filled with great information. Yes. Shana, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.